I'm Paul Baxendale, and welcome to the second of my weekly blogs. For those of you who saw the first one last week, thank you for coming again, and welcome. And for those of you who are here for the first time, it's nice to see you. Thanks for coming along. To know more about what these are all about, please visit my website, paulbaxendale.com, to learn a little bit about what I'm trying to do and what these stories are hopefully going to tell you all. The stories will be from my bodybuilding career from the 80s, 90s and the 2000s. Today we're going back to late 1992. Blog number 2. My first visit to Temple Gym. Meeting the Shadow. Progress is not achieved by luck or accident, but by working on yourself daily. Epictetus. 2 days after the NABBA British final, I woke up knowing I was going to go and visit Temple Gym for the very first time, and hopefully see the great man himself, the Shadow, Dorian Yates. Although I had no idea whether he would be there that day, all I knew was that I was going to go there at the time I knew he normally trained, about 10:30 to 12 in the morning. I just competed, so I wasn't going to be lifting anything heavy. So trying to impress anyone was out of the question, and even in my off season, my lifting wouldn't have impressed anyone anyway. But I was in shape, and hopefully I would maybe get an acknowledgement or a hello if he was there, to give me a chance to introduce myself and tell him how much I admired him and his physique and his style of training. Looking back, I was so naive, but sometimes it takes the naivety of youth and innocence to do things that, with life experience, we would shy away from. This was certainly one of those ideas. So there's a lesson here. Don't allow past experiences to colour the way you view new ideas. Just because you've been rejected before, or failed at it, or embarrassed even, doesn't mean that future actions will turn out the same way. What have you got to lose, really? And what can you gain? Just go for it and do it. The worst case scenario is that the answer will be no, but I'll guarantee the person you ask will respect your courage and enthusiasm to even ask. I drove down the motorway from Telford to Birmingham and into the centre of town and parked in a multi-storey right near New Street, not far from the city centre and not far from Temple Street. I got there early, around 10 o'clock in the morning, and sat and prepared myself to give my all in the workout to come, no matter what my strength levels were. I was going to make sure that I wasn't going to look like some newbie wanting to try and get an autograph from the man. I was going in there to train. I had a very small snack and a pre-workout stack to make sure I was completely in the zone and focused on what I was training, and whatever else happened that day would be a bonus. Heck, I was going to train in Temple Gym, the home of Mr. Olympia. That in itself was a thrill and a treat. When I mentioned a pre-workout stack, don't think it was anything like the pre-workout powders available today, because they just didn't exist back then. We had no pre-workout supplements, no NO boosters, no intra-workout powders, vitamins. We had nothing but protein powder, weight gain powder, vitamins and mineral packs, boron, don't even ask about that. Creatine had just come in, but I hadn't used it. The supplement industry was basic, and it was just about to explode with 1,000 new products. But luckily, because we didn't have to sift through all the marketing, we just had a few options, and most of us kept it very simple. A protein powder, a vitamin and mineral pack. But what do I mean by pre-workout stack? Well, back then, Dan Duchesne had just come out with a product in the US called Ultimate Orange, which was a pre-workout powder loaded with ephedrine and therefore worked big time. Well, we didn't bother getting Ultimate Orange. It was too expensive over here in the UK. And we had something even better. We had the original formula, all completely legal and legitimate to buy back then. We used 2 25 milligram ephedrine tablets 200 milligrams of caffeine in Pro Plus, and half an aspirin. The ephedrine and caffeine as stimulants obviously triggered the central nervous system and brain chemistry to get you fired up and focused, and the aspirin acted synergistically, helping both the other compounds work more effectively, and also thinning the blood slightly to help prevent any blood thickness issues. These days, ephedrine is no longer legal to purchase, so it's out of the question for athletes. Its safety was questioned after a woman died after running a marathon after taking ephedrine, but being poorly hydrated, sadly she suffered a heart attack. But in reality, there was very little scientific evidence to show any harmful effects of ephedrine if it's taken as recommended by the labels back then. However, I would also mention that this stack was also the most effective fat-burning supplement available back then. We would take it first thing in the morning pre-contest and then at midday to create 2 peaks in adrenal energy and fat loss stimulation. But off-season, I would only ever take it on 2 days per week, on leg day and back day. Using it pre-contest, it was obvious that our bodies quite quickly relied on it to get started, similar to being addicted to coffee or tea or plain caffeine. So once the shows were over, we would clean out. And you would definitely notice the withdrawal about 48 hours or so, similar to detoxing off coffee. And once our bodies had found its equilibrium again, we would introduce it back in, but just on those 2 days a week. On the days that you really needed that extra kick up the arse, leg day and back day. It's funny when I see the range of supplements in stores today and read the labels and marketing hype and then look at the physiques. Anyway, that's maybe one for another post another time, and one that will hopefully help you save a lot of money. Anyway, let's go back to Birmingham 1992. I remember I got my kid out of the car and I set off down the steps out into New Street and headed off for the corner that I knew Temple Street joined onto. I knew there was a tailor shop very near the corner, so I looked out for that. And I knew that at the top of the street was a large civil building with huge balls of stone or granite set on the ground around it. In fact, there was a photograph of Dorian leaning against one of these huge stone balls in one of the magazines one year. I think it was Flex. I'll have to try and find it for one of my Instagram posts for you. Before I knew it, there was a corner of Temple Street. It was a lot closer than I thought. It was basically right in the middle of Birmingham city centre. Yet if you had asked anyone where Temple Gym was, they probably wouldn't have had a clue. I turned up the street and walked up, checking both sides for an alleyway or something that would give me a clue as to where the gym was. Nothing. And then opposite to where I was walking, I saw an alley and a small sign saying Temple Gym on the wall. I was closing in. I walked down the alley, and as it bent left, there in front of me was a large grey car with the personalised plates of D-A-Y, I can't remember the rest, right outside of a red door, which was open to what seemed like complete darkness. I'd not only found it, but the man himself was there. I'll admit the butterflies started to appear in my gut, as I knew this could be a significant moment for me. Even just seeing him would have been a treat of a lifetime. But I was going in to train too, so I was probably going to end up training in front of Dorian Yates. It was time to get into the zone and get serious. It seemed empty. There was no noise from the outside, and no one could have known what was going on in that building during those years. I stepped up the door and down a set of stairs, fairly steep, going down into the gym. You could see nothing of the gym from the top of the stairs. There was a feeling, an atmosphere. You knew you were entering something very special, a world that was very unique and one that most people didn't even know existed, nor knew how to enter. I know this may sound as though I'm overemphasizing the secrecy or uniqueness of the place, but I'm not. There was something very real, tangible, unexplainable, indescribable in that place. And once I was walking down those steps, I had a feeling my life would be changed in some way. And it was. I was to witness the most extreme, most intense, highly charged workouts ever. I'd seen what was happening down there, and nothing would ever be the same again. No gym would be the same. No workout would be the same. The experiences that I saw and I had would stay with me for the rest of my life. All of those things I'll attempt to share in blogs later to come. I'll try as best as I can to explain the workouts and capture the feelings and intensity of those days for you. As I walked down the stairs, I saw photographs on either side of the walls going down. Later on, the walls would be covered in photos, but back then there was just one or two on the walls, and I could see the gym floor opening up ahead of me, and the bench and chairs around it, where we would later sit after our workouts and chat, and then the reception desk appeared right in front of me. But there was something in the way of that reception desk. A man, I think it was a human, was stood with his back to me, talking with someone behind the desk. But this was no back that I'd ever seen before in clothes or out. He was dressed in workout clothes. I think it was some T. Michael sweatshirt and baggies. I can't remember exactly. My memory is pretty bad these days. But what the hell was that in front of me? It was insanely huge. I'd never in my life seen anything that even remotely resembled to what I was seeing then in front of me. It was Dorian. And that first ever image is something I will carry with me for the rest of my days. That was what I wanted. That was what I was here for. That was what the world was being shaken up with, and it was real. It was pure beef. The width was monstrous. The clothes just hung upon his traps, bellowed down across a vast expanse of muscle, covering, what the heck knew what, but it wasn't fat, that was for sure. Choose someone whose way of life, as well as words, and whose very face, as mirroring the character that lies behind it, have won your approval. Be always pointing out to yourself, either as your guardian or as your model. There is a need, in my view, for someone as standard against which our characters can measure themselves. Without a ruler to do it against, you won't make crooked straight. Seneca. After I'd stared for what seemed like minutes, but was probably only milliseconds, the last thing I wanted to be seen was some sort of fan or to disturb him. I approached the counter and asked for details on training there. The lady behind the counter told me the price. I think it was something like £3 a session, and asked if I would be joining or just having a one-off session. It was actually Debbie who served me, his wife at the time, and I explained that I was looking to come up about 3 times a week to train, but it was dependent upon the number of days I was able to take off work. So I paid for a session, and she pointed me towards the changing room. As I walked towards it, Dorian looked up and said hi, and I said, "Hi, it's nice to meet you." But it was very obvious that no conversation was going to take place, and I didn't expect one. I couldn't believe I'd even managed to stammer out hello, to be honest. The changing rooms were, let's say, hardcore. I wasn't expecting any fancy changing room or shower facilities, but this was just a concrete block where you could sit with a toilet in it, and there was mold and dirt and grime everywhere. I loved it. I knew this was the place. No one gave a shit about changing or anything else except training and getting the job done. There's a great set of photos taken in 1993 where Dorian is sat on the concrete block in the changing room, and people have said to me, "Where was that taken?" Okay day. Well, today people will be complaining about such facilities, and we even had someone unknown who complained to the local council or someone about them back then, and we couldn't believe they had complained. But seriously, this was the best gym in the world for results, and there was no other gym anywhere that had the atmosphere of Temple Gym, although I'm sure there were others around the globe that were very similar. It was literally electrically charged with passion, energy, commitment, blood, death, sweat, almost a portal between the limits of life and death. And someone wanted to complain about the change room? I'm sorry, but yes, it may not take much to clean the place up, but we were too focused on growing to give anything about the equipment and the workouts. I sat down, took my jacket off, hung it up, stepped out into the gym to train. This was one workout that was going to bring everything. Everything Johnny Fuller had ever taught me. everything that Jeff King had said, Lee Haney had advised, everything that intuitively I knew I had to give. It was shoulders and triceps day. The rest of the gym may have looked like it was cracking at the seams, but every piece of equipment and every machine and every dumbbell was perfectly balanced, oiled, ran smooth like butter, was just the best I had ever trained on. Some of the equipment was maybe 20 years old already at that point, and maybe older. It had been second-hand when Dorian had bought it himself. But it was looked after with meticulous care and attention. That's what happens when you have a gym where the owner also trains and competes. If they don't train, then they don't care. If something's out of order or doesn't run smoothly. But Dorian made sure everything was perfect. He went round every piece of equipment personally before every workout to make sure everything he was going to use was 100% in order. Even the slightest sticking point or imbalance was corrected immediately. I warmed up, began with shoulder presses, dumbbell shoulder presses, one of my strongest movements then and now. I always had dominant delts, which was great for my shoulder development, but it meant that I had to adjust my chest training to make sure that my delts never really took over the tension. And at that point, I hadn't mastered it. It was Dorian who showed me how over the following months, as he too had dominant delts. How we did so will be in a future blog. I worked up to a pressing around 90-pound dumbbells, or something around that, moving on to side lateral raises for umpteen sets, and then behind the neck shoulder press on the Smith's machine and cable side lateral raises before moving on to triceps. It was getting pretty hot down there, even 20 meters below ground. So I thought I'd take off my sweatshirt down to a t-shirt and began with tricep pushdowns. I'm not quite sure what possessed me to go the extra step to strip down to a vest, but it was probably ego and the knowledge that I'd done the Britain 2 days before, so I knew I was sliced and diced. But looking back, I have to laugh at myself for being such an idiot or an arrogant prat. Maybe that's harsh on myself, but come on. I was in Mr. Olympia's gym and I was stripping down to a vest. Anyhow, that's what I did. What was Dorian doing while I was training? Well, he was training also. I couldn't tell you what, as I made sure I didn't make any eye contact whatsoever. I didn't look over at him. I just instinctively knew it would have been disrespectful and something he wouldn't have wanted. He didn't want anyone looking at him as he trained. I was right. In the future, when we started training together, my father once came down to Temple to meet me after he'd been shopping in Birmingham. And not knowing who he was, Debbie had gone straight across to him and said, "You're welcome to sit down, but please don't look at them while they're trained." He then explained he was my father and she apologized, but he knew anyway. And I think he respected the fact that we were doing something that was very serious, professional, and on the limit of being dangerous. So any distractions from anything could have dire consequences. What I did notice was that Dorian was training with another very good bodybuilder, Kenny Brown. I didn't know his name at the time. A very talented black light heavyweight who competed in the EFBB. He was a lot smaller than Dorian, but his intensity levels were very close to what Dorian was generating, and what they were generating together was frightening, and I loved it. But it was scary frightening. I'd never seen intensity and effort like that. It was coming across the floor from the gym, and it was very apparent to me that it was a completely different world than the one I had been living and training in. Maybe, just maybe, there was an answer here. That's why I was there, and already I was learning that whatever it was I was doing in the gym was nowhere near what these guys were doing. It wasn't even if I was actually training more, just pushing weights and getting pumps. These guys were training. Anyway, I was down to a vest and doing tricep pushdowns, doing my normal multiple sets, as I guess 99% of all bodybuilders were doing at the time, and still do. I was still tanned up. My triceps have always had nice feathering on them. So I was enjoying the sets, feeling good, and I guess I was looking pretty good too. What is they say about pride in a fall? The next thing I know, Dorian and Kenny have moved across to close to where I was training, and Dorian had watched me for a few seconds. I finished my set, and he came up to me, and in his deadpan straight way said to me, Good condition, lad. You just need some muscle. I smiled and said, thanks, I'm trying. He moved on to his own workout, but I think he was thinking, this lad is keen, but he's never going to build any muscle training like that. But I'll never know for sure. I'm sure he doesn't even remember that moment, but it's ingrained in my mind and was quite a defining moment for me. Yes, it was good that Dorian Yates had complimented me on my condition. Incredible, really. But then he gave the full Yates dry sense of humour in the line of truth that I really needed to hear and to build some muscle. And I knew it. We suffer more in imagination than in reality. Seneca. I finished up the workout, and luckily Dorian and Kenny finished around the same time. I can't remember if I timed it to coincide, but it's quite likely. I went to the desk and asked for a carb drink, as I noticed that Dorian and Kenny were both drinking one, and I sat down at the bench. Dorian was spooning in from a large tub of powder something into his mouth and taking a gulp of carb drink to wash it down with. I took a look, as obviously I was intrigued to learn exactly what it was, how he ate and what he supplemented with. It said Musashi on the tub, but had small pictures of a horse on the outside. He took a teaspoonful, I guess about 5 grams, and it turned out to be branched chain amino acids for racehorses. This was before Musashi got into making sports supplements in a big way for humans, and it was a brand that I'd never seen in the UK before. I'd never even heard of. And try as hard as I couldn't find any outlet in the UK where I could get the product. I think they were actually sending him the tubs directly from Japan or from Australia at the time. So I stuck with the carb drink, which was called Carbo Force or something, which was 100 grams of carbohydrate from maltodextrin and 1 or 2 other sources. 100 grams. If I took that amount now at 55, I'd be fat in no time. Well, we changed our post-workout nutrition over the months and years that I both trained with and saw Dorian train, and I'll cover the various products we used and the results we experienced in future posts. It was all a learning game, and we were the guinea pigs. Would a guru have saved us some time and wasted hands-on research back then? I doubt it. We had to get to know our own bodies. What works for one person isn't necessarily what works for another. And that's why I hate to hear of coaches who give out cookie-cutter diets, who protocols, because it takes away all the true learning of your own body. And you're literally handing the job over to someone who may not always have your best interests at heart. Anyway. It means back then we were our own gurus. If someone had said to us then, hire a guru to help you through the last few weeks of a prep or through an off season, we would have laughed. Yes, there was an inner circle and we exchanged ideas and knowledge, but you had to prove yourself to gain acceptance into that inner circle. And quite rightly, dangerous practices come when people not ready for things do those things. Take your time, step by step, build your foundation, and slowly, that's the part people don't like today. You'll get there if you're committed enough. I keep getting sidetracked. This could go on forever. Anyway, let's get back to the gym and what happened then. Well, Dorian and Kenny had the drinks, came and sat down next to me, and Dorian asked if I'd just competed, and I'd explained I'd just done the Britain. He said he looked forward to seeing me again in Temple Gym, as he felt that the environment was good and I had to learn some new alternative training methods. In other words, he knew that my multi-volume approach wasn't working for me and that my body would respond well to a more intense, lower volume strategy and training. How right he was. I chatted with Kenny a while, and as Dorian stood up to leave, he said goodbye and he would see me next time I was in town. I said that I was planning to come up to Temple Gym 3 days a week. Whether he thought I actually would or not, well, maybe that was the testing ground that would prove to him whether or not I was serious about becoming a pro or whether I was just another bodybuilder who was prepared to stay in their comfort zone. I also got up to leave and I said that I would be up training the next day, to which Kenny said that they too would be training the next day before taking a day off. So we left it, planning on seeing each other the next day. So it looked like I was traveling the next day to Birmingham again. Well, who wouldn't? More experiences will follow in future blogs. I hope you've enjoyed this one. My apologies for the rambling at times, but as I remember things and my brain throws out images and words in front of me. If you enjoyed this, then hopefully you'll enjoy the rest of my blogs, as they're really just memories of my own career and the people I met along the way. And hopefully you'll learn a few things to try and help you along to improve your own chances of success. Progress is not achieved by luck or accident, but by working on yourself daily. Epictetus. I always tried to choose role models that were the best in what they did. Things that I wanted to achieve, whether it was Rex Jones, my first martial arts instructor when I was just 12 years old, who taught me mental and physical discipline. Then as a teenager, not to waste time drinking, wasting days in hangovers, but to discipline both my mind and my body in healthful endeavors. Then Dorian became my role model in bodybuilding. His shadow persona and his outstanding physical development, so far ahead of anyone else at the time, was something I too wanted to emulate. I wanted the freakiest, most shredded, most muscular body I could develop. I remember Dorian saying to me that when he showed up for the Olympia, he didn't want the judges to look up and say, "Gee, that's a great physique, that's beautiful." He wanted them to look up, drop their pencils and say, "What the fuck is that?" Now, it's all too easy to let yourself be consumed by a goal, especially if that goal won't bring you an income, something to build upon for your future and long-term success once your career is over. Of course, I never thought about what I would do when I retired or would no longer want to work 12 hours a day owning a gym. But it may be that you don't have the 0.001% genetics that you need to win the Olympia. In which case, bodybuilding should be something you love, but not the thing that you forsake the rest of your life for. Perhaps there is a bigger purpose out there for you. It might take a while in finding it, but it's really worth searching for it now. Begin and look where your love is, where your passion is, and where you can impact and influence other people's lives most positively. There's normally a clue as to the direction you should take. Who knew that 30 years later I would be working in academia with 2 degrees and a love for literature and mythology? Who knew that an accident that would leave me crippled in a wheelchair? Life throws some unavoidable harshness at us at times, and there is no avoiding all of it. But you can develop the tools you need to get through those harsh times and maybe learn new skills that helps you find another level of enjoyment with. I still love bodybuilding and I still train, but my life is much more balanced now. I'm a husband, father, grandfather, and a son, with other people relying on me financially, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. It all started with a book for me. Why don't you try it? Try a book. Choose a classic that you've never read and just see what you get out of it. It may lead you to some great answers to questions you haven't even asked yourself yet. Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one. Marcus Aurelius. Until next week, thanks for listening. Goodbye.